So I have the chance to talk to audiences all over. Invariably, the first question Cargill is asked, can the world feed itself? There's a very unequivocal answer, yes. Yes now, yes in the future. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is the case in spite of what the media may portray at this moment. The FAO keeps wonderful statistics, and so they take this 1 billion people and they break it down country by country, but they go a step further and they break it down by the number of calories per day that the people are undernourished. And so if you take the two databases that they have and multiply them together, you come up with the degree of undernourishment, and we converted those number of calories into the number of tons of grain required to extinguish that hunger. About 30 million tons, or about 1/6 of the amount of foodstuffs that we converted into fuel last year as a globe. And so did we produce enough calories last year to extinguish hunger in this world? Absolutely. Did we elect to do it? No, we didn't. But it isn't an issue of caloric famine, it is an issue of economic famine. So what problem are we trying to solve for? Are we trying to feed the world as quickly as possible? Or are we trying to do it in a manner that's consistent with the rural sociology challenges that confront us? And I think I could make a good case for the fact that if Africa wanted to feed itself most quickly, the way to do it would be with scale farming. But having done that, I think you would be confronted very quickly with a rural sociology problem and enormous rural to urban migration. And so what we face as a world is the need to keep smallholders on the farm in spite of the fact that they may not be the low-cost producer of foodstuffs in order to avoid an urban-rural population migration that would be unsustainable. And so the challenge the world faces is who's going to pay that rural sociology premium? If it costs more to raise crops on small farms, is that burden going to be borne by the urban poor, or is there going to be an alternative funding mechanism that allows those smallholders to succeed? So here we go, spiraling from complacency to crisis. In 2009, we raised a couple % more calories than it looked like the world was going to consume, and prices plummeted 40 or 50%. In 2010, arguably, we produced less than 2% less calories than we expected when we planted the crop, and prices are up 80% or more depending on the commodity. And in maybe one case where having a wired and interconnected world has hurt us, the ability of information to be transmitted rapidly, and by that, for hyperbole to find its way into the purchasing decisions of thousands or millions of consumers, and we see it. The next one is just on comparative advantage, and certainly we get a lot of opportunities to speak with people in various governments whose response to the events like those we've seen in the last 3 years is to pursue self-sufficiency. And I think the only thing I'll say is to leave it at, if every country on earth tried to pursue self-sufficiency, there would absolutely be less food in the world, because we are not equally endowed by climate or by weather to be self-sufficient. And as a result of that, the role of trust-based free trade becomes increasingly important if we're going to exploit Ricardo's comparative advantage. Increased revenue certainty, and we've talked about the price required to sustain rural sociology, and so we won't go through those one by one. But I think it is important to point out, if you look at the 3 countries that benefited most from Norman Borlaug's Green Revolution 30-some years ago, India, Mexico, and China. And in each case, they had the governmental and institutional capacity to give some degree of revenue certainty to their farmers, where increases in productivity did not lead to precipitous drops in their income. And as a result of it, the big winners in the first Green Revolution were those 3 countries. And I think the policy prescription of that is quite clear for Africa and parts of South Asia. I refer to it as a Solomonic price because Cargill does not want to set it. But the fact is that each of these governments, particularly in places like Ghana that have the capacity to feed themselves, as do many of the countries in Central Africa, they're going to have to make the decision about what is the price they want to get to their farmers in order to motivate the behavior they need to raise their productivity and their yields. And that decision is not an easy one as they balance the needs of their urban consumers and their farmers, but it's a discussion that needs to take place, and hopefully multilateral groups, NGOs and others, the World Bank, can help in that discussion. So in summary, to go over 5 elements that we think are critically important. I guess there are 6. 6 elements that we think, I'm sure the list will grow by next week, that are really important for having this increased food security. First, the ability to understand the trade-offs between a fast path to caloric sufficiency and the needs of rural sociology. Second, that crops be grown the right soil with the right technology and relying on free trade so we can harvest comparative advantage. Third, the critical importance of property rights if we're going to get the working capital necessary to encourage further investment in farming. The smallholders in these countries need some degree of revenue certainty if we expect them to do what their countries really need them to do. Trust-based free trade that's open and facilitated by all, and the private sector's role in being a strong partner in marketing these crops, but also, and importantly, working with people like the Gates Foundation. I love the expression catalytic philanthropy, because at some point it ceases to be philanthropy at all. It just becomes the success of those nations. And so I think this public-private and philanthropic partnership can be a powerful force. And finally, we believe that there are a lot of very important roles in the creation of infrastructure for the world's governments.